dun, 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 dun. And we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Jawin with Jack. I'm the Jack you're looking for. And here every week on Monday evenings, we take some time and have a conversation with an indie RPG figure. Whether it's just a fan or a creator, that's up to, well, my whims. But tonight joining us, we have the basic expert, John. Welcome to the show, man. Glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me on. You know, we were supposed to meet up last week and then I got sick. So I appreciate you like rescheduling and us being able to work out another time.
And tonight's original guest had also something come up and he had to be, he's having his health issues. I was supposed to have Gorgon's Grimoires on tonight.
Oh, okay.
And anybody who follows him on Twitter has seen he's having some issues himself. So, for what it's worth, thoughts and prayers to him and for a speedy recovery. But yeah, man, I'm super stoked to have you on here. I first learned about you through Black Lodge Games. They talked, I think through the chat, and they talked about Macuahuitl and the Wight Box, and those are the two products of yours that I have going. So let's get one plug out of the way. Wight Box and Macuahuitl. Where can people purchase these, John?
Macuahuitl is currently not available on my website, but you can get it as an add-on for the Kickstarter that's going on right now. That exact hardcover version or the print-on-demand version, which is a white cover. And then Wight Box you can get on DriveThruRPG or Lulu. So
yes, this is where I got it. I'm very happy with this print-on-demand version. And the Macuahuitl book, it's, again, anyone who's listening, I do highly recommend it. Even if this is something that's going to be difficult to sell your players on, the book itself is worth having in your collection. It's well made. There's beautiful art in it that's very appropriate to the culture. Did you find a lot of open source sort of Aztec art and images, or did you have to design a lot of your own?
I redrew some stuff that was originally from codexes, like the original Spaniard codexes. So I kind of redrew some of that because I wanted it to be different or to fit a different composition. Most of the art was just original art by me. So if it didn't look like it was that traditional sort of codices art, it was by me. And I think there's one piece in there that I just thought was really, really cool. It's this picture of like the stairs going up, and they're like dragging a guy up the stairs to sacrifice him.
Yes.
And I edited it a little bit. I added some like blood splatters and stuff like that. But that one was a public domain image from like the 1800s or something like that. And I just thought it was really cool. So
yeah, and it really sets the mood and tone of the game for sure. Because this is not a rated PG game. This is adult oriented material. So fair warning for those people who might have sensitive stomachs. So, but if you watched Apocalypto and survived, you can probably handle a game of Macuahuitl.
Yeah. And if you get Macuahuitl and you can't really sell your players on it, because I mean the long and short of it is you guys are playing as bad guys in it essentially. And everything you're doing in Macuahuitl is what the bad guys would be doing in like a traditional D&D game.
Right.
But you can insert all that stuff and make them your bad guys in your D&D game for sure, because it's 0E compatible, so it should plug into most TSR era games.
Brilliant. And that's one of the things I love about this hobby is that so many things are modular in that way. They're easily adapted from one game to the other. I could run that in Castles and Crusades with just the littlest bit of work.
Sure.
Keeping a few rules of thumb in mind. I've gotten way ahead of myself of what I normally do. I wanted to start. I was reading the interview that Castle Grief posted with you this morning. So now I know the answer to my first question, which is how you got started in RPGs. You started with 4th edition?
I did, yeah.
You poor soul.
I didn't know any better at the time, though. You go... The thing
That's what they all say.
The thing is like when back then, so that was like 2008 or 9, yeah. You go into the store and you're like, I want to play D&D, and they're like, well, that's D&D on the shelf over there. You go and buy it. You read the books, you take it home. And if you had no prior experience, and I wasn't really, even then, I wasn't plugged into the online space here on role-playing games. I just didn't even think to like Google forums at the time, of everyone else talking about D&D. So I was totally oblivious to a lot of the criticisms, which I think are valid of that edition. But I had a lot of fun playing that, and back then too, there was no real actual plays. So
Yeah, so
my perception of D&D was that it's a dungeon crawler, it's an adventure game. So that's how I ran 4E. It wasn't like this story gamer sort of thing. It was like very much you guys are crawling through a dungeon, you're crawling through the wilderness. That's how I ran it. I had a lot of fun. But yeah, I started in 4th edition. I mean, like I said, I didn't know any better.
well, and I there's nothing wrong with that as much as I like to poke fun at it, but 4th edition, like every edition, I think particularly if you stick with just the core books, you can actually run a pretty decent game. The 3 core books tend to be the most internally consistent with one another and balanced. It got the most play testing, whereas in every edition, in my opinion, it seems like the deeper you get into expansion book territory, the more crack-headed everything becomes. Like seriously, it's just crack at that point.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, you look at the sheer volume of like 2E expansion books, which there's a lot of neat stuff in there, but it just seems like like you said, how much of that is play tested, how much is broken, and how much is that sounds cool, but not.
I've said on previous shows, my favorite set of the rules, official rules, is the Beckman Rules Cyclopedia. Not because it's the best, it's because it's my favorite. I played it the most when I was a kid, and but like there's stuff in there that I've used in my solo games, particularly like domain rules and the paths to immortality. And it's like, oh yeah, this was clearly not play tested. This I'm following the recipe as it's laid out in the book. And I'm getting a cake 1,000 feet high for some reason,
And I think that's just how a lot of game design is in this hobby, or too, because you really can't play test everything, but you do sometimes want to have something there, even if you couldn't really get to testing it, maybe like you would like, but that's just the nature of it. So
let's get dirty. Is there anything like that in Wight Box or Macuahuitl? Something that I don't know if I play tested this enough, but I really wanted to go in the book.
I'm not sure. Maybe in Wight Box, I think because like I've only dabbled in it, which is a lot of the higher domain stuff, because it's just something that like a lot of people don't ever really get to in their games, right? A lot of people kind of I would say on average, people probably get to the mid levels, even in old school. They get to levels like 5, 6, or 7 before their campaigns fizzle out, or they restart, or they're like, I feel like that's far. They don't really get to level 8, 9, 10, where they're sort of like, I'm going to build a domain, and then we're going to keep going. And then, that would be the point when you restart your campaign. But
right.
But for me, it wouldn't be with Wight Box in that regard. It wouldn't be necessarily any fault of my own in that regard, because it is a clone. So that would be on Gary and Dave if the domain stuff doesn't work. So
okay. Well, since we're on the topic, then you have some other offerings such as Atomic Punk. It's 2240 now, or 2420. What's
2240? Yeah,
2240 is the newest version of Atomic Punk. And you also have Cow Punchers, available, which is a classic Western, not even Weird West, just straight up Western.
Just straight up Western. I was like, I'm going to be different and weird and not do Weird West. So
yes,
it's weird to not do Weird West. So yeah. And that one's my own like dice pool system, which I'm gonna it's a D6 dice pool system. I'm gonna go back and revisit that actually with Victor Gorchev, the Scrying Dutchman. And we're going to actually extrapolate that system at some point in the future here and make like a more generic system and sort of build stuff off of it. Because we both are sort of looked at what I did there and we're like, this is really fun. We could do a lot of stuff with that. And it would be fun to have our own thing that we can sort of reference and use that isn't like on the OGL. It isn't someone else's system. It's like ours. And while that might not be super popular with a lot of people, there's some pride in something that's like yours, So
completely yours from the ground up. I can understand that. And that way it's all yours. It's your words, it's your rules, your system, stuff like that. And
you have control over it. So
right. Well, and since you brought that up, did the OGL stuff have any sort of real serious fallout for you? Did you have to change anything? Have you adjusted your business practices to compensate?
Well, I mean, I think the OGL thing sort of, because I feel like WotC got bullied into releasing the 5.1 SRD onto the Creative Commons. So it's a lot more friendly now. But at the time, I wasn't sure. And so the one thing it did affect was Atomic Punk. So Atomic Punk was originally based like on BX and it used the OGL. And then I was sort of like, I don't want to be beholden to these people if they're going to be doing this. So like, what if I just kind of build the game that I always wanted? You know, like there's do things with it that you wouldn't necessarily be acceptable in the quote unquote OSR proper, you know?
Right.
And so that's how Atomic Punk became its own sort of amalgam of like a 2D10 system, but it still has a lot of the D&D aspects kind of on it. I kind of sell it or talk about it as like, because I love Traveler, which is 2D6, and I didn't want to just copy Traveler, which is 2D6. But when you look at 2D10 and that like probability pyramid, it's like 1% even, like all the way up. It's like this perfect pyramid. And I was like, this is a beautiful spread
Distribution.
Yeah. This needs to be my game system. And so I kind of say it's like, what if Traveler and old school D&D, like classic Traveler and old school D&D sort of just mushed together, you know? And so it made its own unique thing ultimately for the better. Cause again, it's like more unique. It's more my thing. But yeah, the OGL was definitely a weird time. That was like, I don't know what the future is going to hold for making stuff for this very classic rule set, whatever edition you're playing.
And now, if I'm not mistaken, maybe you know better than I do, but the 5.1 SRD is out there. So you have those resources if you want to work in the 5th edition world.
Yeah.
But they have not done an SRD for the 24 books yet.
I'm not sure. I don't think they have. They might have something. I have to look into that. I have no desire to make anything for 2024. So, you know, I don't know. I know there's people that probably are interested in that, and that's an area that I haven't actually considered.
Yeah, it's definitely slow to be adopted, it seems like. My local game shop, I stop in and talk to him from time to time, and he has mentioned, I haven't been in on D&D night, but he's told me they have a really solid D&D crowd, and he's seeing pretty consistent adoption of the new rules. But otherwise, it seems like it's very slow to be adopted. But if memory serves, way back in 2014, 5th edition also wasn't breaking records right out of the gate, wasn't it? Wasn't it a little slow to be adopted? When 4th edition happened, the group I was in switched to Castles and Crusades, and that's where I've kind of been since.
Yeah, we were 4th edition, and we switched to 5th edition in my games and in my groups. I would say I was like about a year late in adopting fully into 5th edition and like getting all my games onto it. Just for no other reason. I knew it was probably better than 4E, but it was just out of habit. You know, you get kind of comfortable even in a system that's maybe not ideal. But yeah, I would say 5E wasn't like an instant success, but I think that, you know, it's interesting to think at the time when it came out how excited people were for it. You know, I think across the board, a lot of people that were dissatisfied with 4th edition saw a lot of promise in 5E and on a lot of that playtest documentation. And I think a lot of old school gamers kind of looked at it because Mike Merles and a lot of those guys, you know, we're going to really harken back. And you could tell that they were looking back at like BX and AD&D for some aspects of things for 5e.
Yeah, I definitely felt when I first picked up the 5e books that they were definitely a step in that direction. It was much closer to the original roots of the game, at least closer to 3rd edition. So if you were coming from one of those editions, you know, then it'll feel the most familiar, I think. But compared to 3rd and 4th, I found it much simpler and easy to pick up. That being said, though, I have not played a lot of 5th edition, a couple of one-shots, a couple of solo sessions, and that's it. So I don't have a lot of experience with it. So I'm wondering if we're just going to see 2024 slowly adopted over time, or if it's really going to wither and die and people will keep playing their 5e.
I think personally they're going to keep playing their 2014, mostly because I think when you look at the pattern of how things kind of go for WotC editions that have, I mean, we don't have a super, there's been at this point, what, 3 editions from them, four editions from them. So it's like, we don't have a super solid pattern yet, but you know, we have third and 3.5 that was very popular, and we have people that are still playing that today. They don't want to move from that, you know. And then 4th edition came on, they didn't want to move from that, and that's the failure of 4th edition is what produces Pathfinder historically, you know.
Yes.
So we have a great edition, or one that's at least well loved, and then we get one that's not so well loved, and then we kind of get 5th edition, which is now very well loved, 2014, and now we have this new version, and it's sort of like, and I think like from what I see with 2024, it's like it's different enough from 2014, where it's like I don't know if it's in a different and not super great ways from what I've seen and heard, but it's close enough to where if you're playing 2014 5e, it's sort of like, why would I make the switch? Why would I buy a new monster manual? Why would I buy a new player's handbook and a new dungeon master's guide? You know?
Yeah, another friend of mine who's more familiar with the 5e in 2024, where he's actually played a bit, has said that he thinks there's a bigger difference between the 2 editions than there was between 3 and 3.5. And you know, to me, I thought maybe like 5.5 was about the right iteration, but again, not being as familiar with the rules, I wasn't quite as cognizant of the changes from one place to another.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've heard, like there's some things that just aren't ultimately compatible. It uses a lot of the same mechanics and the base of everything, but some things resolve differently, or they function differently, or there's different implications. I mean, that just goes to show like how complex rule sets can be, and you know how finicky it can be to design these sorts of things and play them and run them, where you know you kind of there's a butterfly effect on some of these things if you're not too careful. And I think WotC unfortunately has lost a lot of its good designers, and that's partly why I think 2024 it maybe is the way it is in regards to not being super backward compatible, is that like they promised, because there's no one, no offense to them, but there's no one there that can really design, you know, that like they used to be able to, right? Like everyone's left,
right?
So no one's there.
Yeah.
No one's there anymore.
Anyone with a bit of clout to their name seems to have moved on, and most of them are at Critical Role now.
Yeah. And or Merle's is just, he's kind of all over the place, freelancing for lots of people. So yeah, you know, they're not there anymore.
So now back to your work. Your seems like your 2 most popular products by far are Wight Box and Macuahuitl. And speaking of which, you got a Kickstarter going on right now for the Wight Box set. Do I have a link for that?
Should be. I should have given that to you too.
I'm digging it up. We are flexible and agile here at this show.
I think I got it here. I can put it in the private chat.
Excellent. Bada bing. Copy that link. All right, I am pasting it in the chat. Hopefully that works for everybody. But yeah, how's the Kickstarter campaign going? I haven't looked at it yet. Have we hit the funding goal yet? Are you overfunded? Okay,
we're overfunded. We're at $45,524. So
nice, very nice, John.
Pretty big.
yeah. I mean, it's getting up there. I mean, you know, you're nipping at McCrease's heels with that.
A little bit. I mean, he made what did he make? He made 100 something. Right?
Yes, yeah. Last I heard, the Before All Others is clocking over 100K. I think it's 110 now, but yeah. No, that's fantastic, John. I'm really happy for you. I'm glad for you to see the kind of success that you've been having.
Well, it's been a grind. You know, it's not easy in this, and you know, a lot of people. I'm thankful that I have a lot of people that are interested in what I'm doing. I couldn't do it without those kinds of people that are like, "Hey, this guy's neat. And he's making some cool stuff. What's it about? Let's invest in him and take a risk on this single guy who's like a one-man team, one-man show doing everything. You know, let's see what he can do." And you know, they put their trust in me, and I'm super thankful to that. I feel blessed. So
And it's great. And you know what? The proof is in the pudding there, because you're one of the few people in the indie RPG space this is your full-time gig. This is what you're doing for a living, right?
Yeah. And it's, like I've been, well, sort of like I've been freelancing art since 2015. In the TTRPG space and in other places doing graphic design.
That counts to me.
Yeah,
That counts. So
But-
yeah, I know you're doing art for other people, like Shut Doors. You've done a lot of work for Black Lodge Games. Who else was it recently was touting your work? It'll come to me halfway through the show. So when I randomly blurt out a name a few minutes from now, this is what I'm talking about.
I mean, I've also worked on other stuff too. Like I've done stuff for like Call of Cthulhu stuff for Chaosium and Mongoose Traveler, Green Ronin's Expanse stuff. So I've been all over the place with this hobby before I started even writing my own stuff. So
nice. So the art predates the writing in your own creations. Does the art predate the gaming?
No, the art about the same time. So about the same time when I started, I've always done art. I've always done illustration. But about the same time I started getting into D&D, about mid 2000s, I was sort of like, mid to late 2000s, I'm gonna start taking my art more seriously. I decided, so I started like studying more. I started doing more personal study, and by the time like 2015 rolled around, I felt like I was good enough where I could go out there and make a portfolio and start trying to get clients. And it was very slow at first. It was a part-time gig then, but it's been a slow grind. Anyone that is interested in doing that kind of stuff, it's very hard. It's very hard, and it's a grind.
Well,
and you're probably going to have a day job for a while too before you get a little more situated.
Yeah, let me dig at that a little bit. What's the key to that success? Because having been on the internet for a few minutes, I seem to have come across many accounts from artists who were like, they can't make it. It's impossible. They can't do the work. They can't get enough work. Begging for commissions, stuff like that. What was the qualities that you put on the table that made it consistent enough or whatever to go full time eventually, or to make it your gig?
I would say like you for art, it's like you got to be at least halfway decent. So you got to be somewhat obviously skilled at what your craft, at what you do. Find a unique style, all that jazz, all that generic advice. But I'd also say like there's a lot of social aspects that go with it too. So being very accommodating and friendly and communicative with your clients is important. One complaint I see about a lot of people that hire artists is like, I hired this guy and then he just like disappears for a month, and then he doesn't respond to any of my emails for like an update of where he's at. And then like a few days before the deadline, he sends me a bunch of stuff and it's incomplete, or you know what I mean? So like
not at all what you wanted, or
yeah.
Yeah.
And so like if you're you got to be like at least skilled, easy to work with, and friendly, and like fun, nice, wonderful to work with, and you should eventually find work, even if it's like a side gig you're doing or something like that. Like I think people will find you, they'll keep coming back to you, they'll keep recommending you to other people, because I think those are the aspects that are missing. I think part of the problem too is like I don't really fit in with a lot of other artists. I'm not like this like woo, like a lot of artists are like a lot more like easygoing, or they're a little weird sometimes, I guess you could say. Yeah, they're a little more free, a little more free spirited. I'm a lot more I'm a lot more analytical of a guy. I'm a lot more sort of like stoic, and like creativity, while I'm good at it, like takes a lot of effort from me. It just doesn't just naturally ooze from me, like a lot of those guys do. But I think the benefit of that is that I sort of have the more business mindset of talking to clients and treating the art like a business, because you have to do that. And I think some artists feel like, oh, that's selling out, or that's hard, or I don't get it. And you just, if you want to be successful in it though, you have to figure that part out, and you have to get good at it just as much as you are at the actually making the art part,
Yeah, well, and it's so the key points I'm taking away here is you got to develop the skill first and foremost. You got to make people want your art, then you need the consistency to actually do it, and you need the act. It'll freak some artists out, but you need customer service skills so you can communicate, give frequent updates, address their concerns, and then work with them when they do have concerns. That's just part of life. And if your temperament doesn't fit that, I understand. I suffer from similar things. As that's more mental wherewithal than I can muster up. But then you can't complain about your station either. Get your job, continue to make those coffees, and hope for the best.
That, or you got to really lean into, like, if the customer service aspect or some aspect of all these other parts are so hard for you, but you still want to do it, you have to make sure that you're like a god tier at something else within that. Like your artistic skills have to be just like so good, so incredible that people are still willing to like deal with your quirks and maybe your lack of communication and your other failings, because the thing that you bring to the table is so good, and that's very rare. I think that's very rare amongst a lot of people. Like we hear stories, for instance, of like Frank Frazetta.
I was just thinking of him.
He was a very honorary sort of guy. I remember hearing a story about I think it was the Battlestar Galactica poster that I think ABC or someone had him do. And it's Frank Frazetta. He likes curvy women, so he had some butts and some curvy women in some skin tight space suits, and ABC was like, "Oh, we don't really like that." And he's like, "Well, too bad. I guess you don't. I don't need you,
Yeah, I don't need you. You need me. Use the poster. Don't use the poster. I'm not redoing it.
Yeah, and they're like, okay, we'll pay you, So because they wanted to have his name attached to it. So, but that's so rare. You have to be someone like Frank Frazetta to be able to do that. So.
Right, and somebody with serious stature. One of the guys in our circles who I think is just fantastic is Richard Witters.
Oh yeah,
his style of art just blows me away. I love just going through his feed and looking at the pictures.
Yeah, he's very good. He's very nice guy too. I reply to him about something, or I'll ask him a question about art, and he's like super generous with his knowledge too. So he's a good guy.
He is, yeah. And everybody you can find Richard Witters, follow him. He's worth interacting with. So now, as I was covering, this is your full-time gig. This is what you do, the game design and the art. What are the key tips that you've learned in your time doing it? How long has it been your full-time gig now?
I think 2020 is when I like started to really just be like, so it's been 5 years of like solid, like this is it. Kind of induced sort of by necessity, because my wife was making more than me at the time. And our daughter was born and her maternity leave was up. And so we didn't want to put her in daycare. So sort of like, well, one of us has to be home, and you make a lot more than me. I was making good money. I was making good money, but she was making like a lot better money than me. I was working on luxury camper trailers and stuff like that for like a very high end luxury manufacturer. But she was still making more than me. And so I was like, I'll just try this out and see what happens. I've been doing it part-time on the side on top of all this for a number of years now. So let's see what happens. And it was hard. It was not easy at first, but
I can imagine, particularly like those first months, the day after day of, did anybody get any offers? Do I got any nibbles? No, nothing yet.
Yeah.
It really takes patience and persistence and optimism. You got to maintain that positive attitude.
And I would say like part of why I started designing my own games too and doing my own content like what I do now is partly because it was sort of like I'm not getting the opportunities that I want. So I'm not, instead of complaining about it, instead of whining about it or like feeling down about it, like why don't I just make my own opportunities? I know a thing or two about games. I've played them. I've hacked them up and homebrewed and made my own games just for fun for my friends in the past. It's like, so why don't I just implement that? And then it gives me something to illustrate, gives me something to make art for. And that was, I think, what kind of really set me apart in a lot of respects from a lot of other people in this hobby. I mean, I can't think of not to like I'm so great because I'm really not, but like I think what makes me unique is that I do a lot of my own art and I do my own writing and I do my own book layout and everything like that. Like everything, that product, that book that you're getting is like I had something to do with almost every single aspect of that aside from the printing of the book. You know?
Right. Yeah. The layout, font, typesetting, and art, everything.
And so I would say like one thing you can do if you're interested in doing this, even as like a side hustle, as a side gig, is like learn as many of the skills as you can on your own. So like if you might not be artistically inclined to be like, John, I can't draw people. Like I'm not an artist like you. I can't do that. But you might be able to do your own layout. Like you could get Affinity Designer or Affinity Publisher, the Affinity Suite. Get the whole entire Affinity Suite. It's very affordable. And it's not like Adobe. You just pay for it once and then it's yours. And I do all my book layout in Affinity. So like
listening, Velma, Affinity.
Yeah.
Listening. Okay.
So get that and then learn how to use it, and you'll at least save money on the layout aspect, because you know that could be a couple grand there for a project. Like if you have a Kickstarter idea, I have a module, I have a game I want to design. If you're able to do the layout yourself, you know that's huge. You know that's some money saving for you right there. So I think that as a small indie creator, if you're like wanting to get into it, you might not be able to do everything like I do, but like you have to be agile and be able to sort of do as much as you can on your own. You got to wear a lot of hats and it's hard. So you know, it is what it is, but you know, you can do it. It's, you got to grind for a bit though, but it's possible.
And Dunder throws out Affinity often has really good deals around Christmas.
Yep, they do.
Oh, and of course, the Pun King. Hello, Pun King. I've ignored the chat so far. Is that a cross between a fish and a mammal? Affinity? Yes, that's clearly what it is.
He's living up to his name, so.
Oh, man, every week. Every week. Yeah, catching up on the chat. Early on, Traveler is the beta game ever. Fight me back. Fight me, Jack. Okay, so I agree with you. Beta, second place, lower tier. Done. Fight over.
I mean, I love Zero E. I would say my two favorite games would be like Zero E D&D and then Classic Traveler. Those are like my two favorite games. So I don't have a problem with saying like it's a second tier. It came after. It's definitely influenced by it. So
that's one that's surprisingly passed me by all these years. I've never played Traveler, never owned a copy, never known anybody that's owned a copy even.
It's like, great. I'm running I'm running that for my in-person guys right now. We're doing a Classic Traveler campaign. They're just like a bunch of scummy smugglers and ne'er-do-wells with their own ship that are just trying to make their mortgage payment. So month to month, it's a good time.
Yes, yeah, that I keep hearing that. That's more or less. We did a little Mothership recently, and it was a similar experience. High character turnover. So, welcome, Dunder. Glad to have you here, my bro. Velma, my dear. Glad to have you, darling. Alchemic Raker, glad to have you here. And Macuahuitl is fantastic. It's not an exaggeration.
And he has a good the Old Lords, you know. If you're interested in chainmail, you should check out the Old Lords. So.
Absolutely. I've done both. I have both Old Lords and Hellmarch. I got the PDF and a hard copy on the way because I don't know about you. I just can't take to the PDFs, John. I don't like using them and reading them.
No, they're fine for referencing once you've already read it, but I can't read and learn the game from a PDF. It's just too hard.
And yeah, also another benefit is if I want to print one specific page out of the book, it's a lot easier to print that page from a PDF than it is to cram my book onto my printer copier.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, you see, we're talking about everything. Most John's here, so we're talking about a lot of Wight Box, a lot of Macuahuitl, and we're also touching on the lesser known IPs of Cow Punchers and Atomic Punk.
And maybe some inside knowledge on if you want to get into this yourself. I'm fine with that too.
Well, and yeah, that's one of the things I do appreciate is hearing more about the business side of making this work in the RPG scene and what it takes, what you got to do, Like, is this an 80-hour-a-week job for you, or or
I don't know. My wife is always on me about like I need to clock my hours more precisely. I don't. I probably should. I try to when I'm doing client work because it's good. I charge per piece. I don't charge by the hour. So
right,
I try and time myself when I'm doing art because it's like, oh, you're cutting the limit here where this isn't worth it for you anymore. You need to hustle.
right,
But
yeah, you do have
I
to budget in the amount of time it's going to take you to complete the piece, but you can't become too perfectionist because that eats into the profit margin.
But I don't know. I don't know if it's 80. It is probably like over a full-time gig for what I do though right now for,
Mhm.
not a whole lot of money, but it's enough.
Hey, you're getting by. Well, and
I mean, we own our house. We have a nice house and like
awesome.
you know, uh, my wife has to work though. I'd like to get it to where she doesn't
Eventually,
have to. We could homeschool and stuff like that, but
we all have
um
those dreams, man, and I
yeah.
want to see it happen for you. So I'm cheering. I played Braunsteins in so many systems, but the only D&D I've played is 1E and 5E. Wow. So yeah, I've played every edition over the years, except for original. I missed the boat on that one back in it was 79 or so when I got started.
Yeah, so you're already getting into the Holmes basic and
Yeah, home
80
base.
was going to come out, or I think some of the books were already out. So
Yep, Holmes Basic was my first box set, and that's what we played at first. And we quickly moved on to the AD&D hardcover books, and it was a few years after that where I finally convinced a friend of mine to play for the first time. He bought his own rules, but it was the red box set from the Menser years, and that's when I got into that because I had a friend who got into it, and like I said, I played that so much over the years that I found I liked it better. It was my first rules light encounter. I liked it better than AD&D because so much of AD&D was we ignored so much of the rules that it was like playing BX anyway. But yeah, hey Patty, he's at
Hey,
work.
what's up, Patty?
And of course, Yang, I gotta shout him out. I can't remember if I've had you here before, Yang, but glad to see you, man. Yang is going to be a guest on the show in the future as well, although the exact date is escaping me.
Yeah, he's got his Kickstarter coming up soon. He was on Natural Ones on my stream not too long ago. Yang is a good guy, and I'm excited to see his 1E 5E book come out. It looks really neat. He sent me a preview copy of it, and it looks really cool.
Nice. Very good. Very good. So if someone started with 25 5A, would they need the 24 DMG and PHB for completeness? The backwards compatibility hamstrings it. So again, far from being an expert, I think you do need the if you're going to go up to 24, you need all three books. I don't know that they're going to be really great meshing with one another.
Yeah. From what I understand, they're different. They're close enough to where you can understand that they're built on the same DNA, but they're different enough where there's some stuff that's not compatible. So
yeah, I definitely feel that way. And then sorry, I was clarifying 14 DMG and PHB. Well, yeah, I don't know about that. Again, I haven't heard anyone say that it's not backwards compatible. There is no such notion. And Yang is also pointing out that you wouldn't need the 14 stuff. And Yang also, being an artist himself, he knows this too, is the more work you can do for yourself, that's more you get to put in your pocket. Like if you can self-edit and don't have to pay an editor, great, good on you. And I got to admit, though, there's something special and cool about creators that are the one-man shop, right? They do their own art, they do their own writing, they publish their own materials. I mean, there's Castle Grief. Yang, I know, does his own art, and he's got his own stuff coming out there. I can't think of others in that space at the moment, the people who have gotten down and done their own art.
Kevin Ciambita, I always mispronounce his name, but from Palladium, I know that's how he got started.
Yeah.
He did a lot of comic book art. So a lot of those early books, like what is it?
Mechanoids and stuff like
Yes,
that.
Mechanoid. I was just trying to get that. That's all his art inside, So I respect that. I think that's cool. He was doing it back then,
Yep. And it's one of those things. I tell you, I have this wonderful love-hate relationship with Palladium over the decades that I've been playing their games, because it's, I got sick of Palladium before Rifts came out. By the time Rifts came out, I was like, I am done with that. I took one look at the Rifts book and I'm like, oh no, I recognize that chart. I'm not buying that chart one more time. Like, come on, dude. There's even a typo on this chart that you haven't fixed in like 50 books that I've seen or bought from you. Come on, dude. But in the fullness of time, I've come to have a healthy respect for his design philosophy, which is I'm not going to obsess. I'm not worried about that, because you're just going to change it to be whatever you want at your table anyway. Like, so he's kind of the extreme end of that design philosophy you've been on about Rule Zero. Like, you need Rule Zero in your toolbox to play Palladium games as they are.
I think that's why I'm personally not a big fan of Palladium myself either, any of their games. I have a number of them just to have them on my shelf. Like I have Heroes Unlimited, I have Rifts, I have the Mechanoid trilogy. But they have their Christmas sale if you're interested. I think it's a great deal. You get like I think you pay like $60-$70 and they send you just tell them like maybe what you're interested in, they send you some random books. So that's what I kind of do when I'm interested in Palladium stuff. But their games are definitely probably not for me personally.
Yeah. There is a fun in them, the way the system works and stuff like that. It doesn't sound like it would be all that important, but the fact that you roll a d20 for your defense in addition to the attack really adds something to it. And beyond that, it more or less functions as D&D, any other tabletop game. But yeah, I have several of those books over the years, some of which I still love, despite the love them warts and all. It's kind of the same thing, I don't love them because they're necessarily good, but they do bring something special to it.
And Jeremy's saying there is Savage Rifts. I have not looked at the Savage game system, which I need to. Victor Gorchev is like all about Savage Worlds, and I trust his judgment. So I need to play some Savage Worlds of something.
Definitely, I will be looking forward to hearing what you think of that. I also like Savage Worlds a lot. It's a very simple system, so simple that your character sheet can basically fit on a 3x5 card.
I like that.
Yet at the same time, it has enough to it where it can provide a pretty satisfying tactical scenario if you want to move a bunch of figures around on a table, have a little skirmish game, or do some dungeon crawling, stuff like that. And the core rules, I like universal systems, so because that allows for weird genre mashups. I want to mix steampunk with Cthulhu and horror. Not terribly original off the top of my head, but
maybe they're on some pulp fantasy on top of that. So there's like a barbarian with a sword that's in there for some reason but it's compatible and it works. So.
And I got to address Yang here. I always wanted to play Palladium's Robotech games. I don't blame you. It's actually kind of terrible. Alexander McCreasy, if you've ever heard him talk about it, he said it's a functional game. It does work, and it's even fun in its own way, but it utterly fails at simulating the cartoon. If you think your RPG adventures in Robotech are going to resemble anything in the cartoon, it will not. And he mentioned he used a Mecton system, the Mecton to Zeta system, which is from our Talzorian games, which is also a longtime favorite of my own. So when I eventually get McCrease on here, I'm going to badger him to tell me about what he did with Mecton to make it work for Robotech. Paladin, yo, good to see you, man. Glad to have you here.
Good to see you.
Now, one of the things that I have wondered in your own catalog, Wight Box, Macuahuitl, the fantasy games seem to get the market share, and that seems to be at large, whereas sci-fi, westerns, post-apocalypse, all of the genres really do seem to pale in comparison. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think there's something magical about fantasy. I don't know. I think that we're really drawn to it. I think um I think the rise of things like the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's writing just becomes so uh ubiquitous in the sort of the mindset and the zeitgeist of us growing up. That we're all like instantly familiar with it. It's easy to jump in. It's easy to sort of like understand the context of the game. And so I think that's why fantasy just always has always been the top dog as far as genres are concerned. I would say sci-fi is probably second, but
Yeah, that definitely seems to be the case. And one anomaly that always has struck me is apparently in the Japanese role playing community, Call Cthulhu is the big game.
I think that's
than D&D.
It's big. It's the biggest Western game, but they're all playing Sword World is what they're doing.
Oh,
which is fantasy. So,
okay. Yeah.
Do you know Record of Lodoss War?
I do.
That? So that started as Beckme Games, but they wanted to sort of publish some stuff referencing the D&D rules, and TSR at the time was like, "No, you can't." And so they're like, "Well, screw it. We'll make our own game, and we'll start running play reports, running our own game." And so that's how Sword World was made, from what I understand. So there's actually going to be an English version of Sword World 2.5 coming out, which I'm excited about. I'm interested to see what it's about, because the Japanese have interesting ideas about tabletop role playing games in the games that they have made, like Sword World, or I just backed Where's Blade. That just finished funding on Kickstarter, which is like medieval fantasy, but they have giant mechs as well. And so, and it's an old game from like the early 90s. So I'm excited to get that in.
And what was that called again?
Where's Blade? Wares, and then Blade, Blade. So
nice. And
but
Jeremy speaking truth for us, because everyone wants to fight a dragon. They want to be Sir George and slay the big bad guy and win the hand of the princess. Well, I mean, everybody needs a princess, that's for sure. And everybody wants to fight the dragon.
I think that fantasy is just easy to sort of set up and go, whereas like it's easy to set up like a wilderness map and go like, there's a dungeon here, there's a village here, there's a castle here, and there's a city here.
Yeah, there's a cave up in those hills, or go check it out.
It's way easier. Whereas like if you look at something like Classic Traveler, for example, and you're going to run some sci-fi, I think you have to sort of be a little bit more. You haven't absorbed sci-fi as much through osmosis and culture, I think, as you have maybe fantasy.
Right.
And so I think that's part of it. I think you could do it, but it's harder to do and appeals to fewer people, I think, because of that.
Right. I just find it so odd, because sci-fi in terms of movies and TV shows seems, if anything, more popular than fantasy. We see more sci-fi movies than we do fantasy ones. And I guess maybe there is something about fantasy that lends itself well to the gaming experience. Sci-fi in particular lends itself towards hard sci-fi, which is much more realistic or simulationist, which is consequently dangerous, and you're not playing heroes even, let alone superheroes.
Yeah, I mean, like I said in my Classic Traveler game, it's always fun when you're playing Classic Traveler and the party gets a jump on some bad guys that they're fighting, and they just like smoke them. They just like waste them with their SMGs or their rifles, and they hack them down to their blades or whatever, boarding a ship, and they're like, that was fun. And then they sort of stop and think, and they're like, well, the NPCs all are built in the same manner as a player character, so this could easily have happened to us. And that definitely sets in with them, and they're sort of like, oh, this is scary.
Yes.
and that you don't get that even in old school D&D, because in old school D&D, even still, I don't think it feels quite like that, like the way Classic Traveler makes you feel, where it's like one hit and you're screwed.
Yes. I feel similar about the combat in Cyberpunk 2020. It's a game that I've always respected it because it still moves really quickly at the table, but maintains the realistic deadliness of firearms. Because pretty much you get hit, unless you're well armored, you're going down more or less.
Yeah. I think Patty has a good comment there. He says, I think people yearn for good fantasy. Fantasy movies have a great way of showing and appreciating tradition, whereas most sci-fi stories are overly progressive. And I don't know if it's necessarily just that, but sci-fi has a big tendency of being kind of nihilistic, I think, as well. It's very very grim. It's always like dystopic. And there's something a bit more charming and I think hopeful about like there's a bunch of castles and you go jousting and you fight goblins, like that's a little bit more like even if it's grim dark fantasy, I think it doesn't feel the same nihilistic sort of
I
aspect of
agree.
sci-fi.
So much of sci-fi is intrinsically, like you said, nihilistic and intrinsically atheistic. Like there's no belief in a grander structure to the universe. Even it's all just chaos and meaningless void. And I think that's why there's a few mysterious sci-fi books that I've read. Stuff I like Dan Simmons' Hyperion trilogy. Good story. But it was still very, I don't know, almost postmodern. It was very deconstructionist. It was didn't leave you with a lot of hope by the end of the book.
There is a blog. I can't find it now, but just it's funny. I'm always interested in it. He has a blog where he's an Orthodox Christian, and he has this far future using the traveler rules that is like Orthodox Christianity still there. He doesn't have aliens or anything like that.
Okay,
but it sounds super cool. I read his blog from time to time. It's super neat.
I
can't find it though.
Kind of tangentially reminds me of Ender's Game, because
I can't find it though. Oh well.
Well, when you do find it, send it my way on Twitter. We'll start a conversation about that.
That's just what popped in my head because that just seemed like an anomaly. We're like, well, this guy's like doing something where he's kind of breaking the mold a little bit. But
and for that reason alone, man, that deserves some attention. How many people love Lord of the Rings and Princess Bride? Agreed. And Hollywood, if you're listening, don't remake the Princess Bride. Don't remake the Lord of the Rings either. When it comes right down to it, give it another 50 years. Let it lay fallow for a bit.
Yeah, but I love both. I love fantasy and sci-fi. I mean, obviously, my Atomic Punk game is like post-apocalyptic, but it has like sci-fi elements to it. So I like both. But I think that there's just something more innate. I think also too because sci-fi is sort of in the future and what could be, and we're not really certain of that. Whereas there's a sort of antiquity to fantasy where it's like this is familiar. There's a world that was sort of look like this that once existed. I think there's something sort of about that as well that makes it more appealing to more people.
And that's an important thing right there. You hit on there's so much to the sci-fi experience that's alien to us the way we live, just like learning to cope and live in zero gravity. I don't know if that's a factor or if they use artificial gravity in Traveler.
I think it's a bit of both. I kind of use both, but
that classic thing that gets hand waved on TV because it's just too hard to simulate, but it's a complete lifestyle change. The Expanse seemed to handle that from what I heard in the books.
Yeah,
they handled that really well of talking how the Belters and the Martians, you saw the biological changes in the ones that were born either in space or on Mars right away in the first generation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think there's something sort of like you look at medieval fantasy and you're sort of like, well, this looks like there's medieval Europe and it's just that, but with the monsters are real, they're prowling about, it's instantly more familiar. So I don't know. I love fantasy. I love both. And I know some people sometimes get sick of it. Sometimes I get over fantasied out a little bit. That's partly why I'm doing a Traveler game right now, but I'm still running Wight Box games and solo gaming Wight Box. But, it's nice to have something a bit different than like the typical fantasy adventure to be in a spaceship and trying to get work. And
right. And I can see where that is a fun game, a fun campaign. I think it's in that way, it's similar to the old original D&D rules of, oh, wow, I didn't expect finding an abandoned barn on the side of the road to be so interesting and lead to so many cool things. I think the same thing happens in a role-playing game like Traveler, where, okay, I have no idea what a comms officer really does except for Amuhura on the bridge. But but then you get into playing the game and you go, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. I see how this works. I like doing this.
Yeah. Pardon me, I'm still
no worries.
Coughing here.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I got like just a touch of drip going on myself. I keep hearing that a lot. There's a lot of like
there's a bug going
around, and like people. I'm hearing people call him from work all the time, and it's we all work remotely. We're all over the country,
Yeah.
So, but everybody's getting sick everywhere at the same time. It seems
not fun.
Oh yeah, and please, Mr. King is my dad. Call me Pun.
But his name is the Pun King, so
yeah. Pun King. His first name is the. Basic expert. The surfer has a cold. I don't quite get that one, but I like the basic expert. Oh,
yeah, there you go.
Oh,
he's just still he's.
Oh, geez. I walked right into that one. All right, yeah, you get bonus XP for that one. That's plus 10 XP. I'm even going to put that one in the chat here. Oh, block, yeah, block seems like a good option.
That was pretty good. You had to read that one out loud.
Yeah, I did. It occurred to me. I didn't get it until I read it out loud. Okay, yeah, definitely bonus XP for that one. So, what do you have planned coming up in the future here?
Oh man, there's a lot. So, I really want to focus like on my own stuff, and I kind of want to retool my zine to be more focused on just 0E and specifically like Wight Box stuff. So, articles and adventures and things like that. Kind of extrapolating that. I'm kind of toying with that idea. But I also want to just do more dedicated supplements. So Wight Box with the Kickstarter, you get the game board, which is like a wilderness map. And it's an actual like cardboard game board. It's not like paper.
Oh, cool.
So it'll be like the real outdoor survival board that you originally had to purchase, but it comes with the game this time. But I want to sort of like do like a gazetteers or modules and adventures that sort of explain based on my own home setting on that wilderness map, because everyone's playing on the same wilderness map, as a setting. What I think like that castle is, what that city is. There's a dungeon over here. There's these factions doing this over here. So I'd like to start making content for Wight Box that would do that, like write adventures, but write adventures the way I want to see them written. I'm not a big fan of like the adventure path way that adventures are written. So I'm working on an adventure right now, which gives you like a city, a village, and a dungeon. But I want to like really encourage you to use like the generative tools in Wight Box to sort of expand things out and sort of teach you how to run a sandbox or like load a zero prep game with that, where you sort of like you reference this. You have this like pre-set up area where the player, like the dungeon, where the players can go and explore it.
Sure.
But you should be restocking that after they go out, and so it might start changing based off what's written in the module, But then also as they're traveling around, like use the generative rules to sort of be like, over here there's like this ancient altar that's just like on top of a hill. What's that about? Start generating your own sort of adventures spontaneously.
Right.
And so I want to have adventures that do that instead of just like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, the end, buy the next module and see what happens next. I want it to feel like a real living campaign and world. Like I say in Wight Box, up to 50 people can play this game because that's what 0E says. Up to 50 people can be in this campaign. So I really want to push you towards like the grand campaign, the war game part, giving other players maybe high level NPCs, like, you're going to play the king that rules over this city. These are the resources and the troops that you have, and this guy over here, he's going to control the hobgoblin king over here, and he has this treasure and he has this many guys at his disposal and he can do XYZ. And you start getting this war game going on that wilderness map based off of these modules that I'm giving you. And while there's this war game going on, and maybe that king over here and the hobgoblin king are bashing it out, you have a couple adventuring parties from your group of friends on your server or in person that are kind of in the midst of that getting involved. I just think that that's like such a cool way to play. So I want to make modules that sort of go to that. It's a very lofty goal. I don't know if I'll be successful at it, but I at least want to give like the tools to do that.
Right. And it sounds like you lean much more towards the setting based modules rather than a event based adventure or adventure path. I tend to very much agree with that. I've found that adventure paths are they really are just too railroady, and at some point or another you're forcing the player characters to follow the predetermined path.
And some play groups like that. That's great, and you can keep buying those adventures. I want to make adventures that sort of just give you like a bunch of tools to sort of throw into this world, and like they're going to enter like I said, the hobgoblin king over here and the king that's in this city over here. Like, what happens when you put those in control of two players and those goals sort of clash? And they start battling with each other. They start sending hobgoblin spies into the city to start sabotaging things. And now that king player is sort of like, he's willing to maybe hire adventuring companies to go and secure that goblin hovel, the hobgoblin cave, and deal with this menace that's harassing his people. I think that gets to an adventure. It gets to a story, but it does it in a more organic way that's driven by all the players at the table.
Yes.
And that, I think that gets more buy-in from everyone involved too.
It absolutely does. Actually, my experience mirrors that. The more input or control you give players over the world by taking on the role of NPCs and stuff like that, the more into the world they get. So, like if I have a player who's playing a thief and they sit down at my table, I work with that player to say, okay, well, what's your status with the Thieves Guild? What are you doing with them? What are the kind of things? Are you even a member of the Thieves Guild? Do you want to be one of those rogues? It's something like that.
But like I said too, I want to also kind of go back to the Cowpunchers rules with Victor, and we want to sort of make a generic system that can sort of do lots of different things. Like, we have ideas for, like, I have some ideas for some historical games that I want to explore. Because I love history, obviously, with Macuahuitl, the Aztec stuff. I love history. I've always loved history.
I think it kind of comes with the territory, at least to a degree.
Yeah, I think it's a fantasy as a gamer, in this hobby, you kind of, I think, have a natural inclination towards liking and being interested in history. So I want to have a rule set that would like work well with that. And since Cowpunchers is like, just Western, it's history. We thought it would work well for that. So we're gonna go back, streamline those rules, make them like generic, and then within the generic rules, it'll give you guidance on like how to do different. My goal, at least, is how to do different things. Like if you want to do like medieval fantasy, here's some basics for that. But then we want to have something that would be like a supplement to that would expand on that to make it bigger.
And the leverage, something we said earlier, I think you would get a lot out of at least reading the Savage Worlds book, because ideas of, it's a set of modular rules and you don't use all of them, but there's enough really basic stuff in this teeny tiny little core book where you can do just about anything. Right? The only thing it doesn't handle really well is superheroes.
Yeah, I want to look at like a BRP, basic role playing by Chaosium, their percentile system, just to kind of see like how they handle the generic stuff. I don't want it. I know people like GURPS, but I don't personally like GURPS. I feel like it's a little too much.
I never got into it. It sounds basically simple, but it gets prohibitively crunchy the more supplements you use.
Yeah. So I want it to feel very intuitive still. So Vic and I are going to be working on that together, and we'll probably do a print run of that via Kickstarter at some point in the future. Him and I are also going to be working on a 5e clone, because we see the failure of 2024, but we also see the failure of like 2014. And 2014, I feel like in particular, no one reads the DMG, unfortunately, for that edition.
Maybe they do now because Ginny D finally did it.
Maybe, yeah. But you know, I see people complaining about it all the time. They're like, "Oh, it's too overpowered. It's too superhero." And it's like, well, just there's rules that like are optional. I know you don't like that term, not you, but general speaking, you know, I'm speaking generally, but those people, you know, they don't like to hear the word optional. But it's like there's some solutions in there. You could try them, you know, and they're like, I don't want to do that. So I feel like 5e also failed like within the DMG on random encounter tools and tables. It has a really great dungeon generator in it, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But it doesn't give you a lot of the stuff that you would want clearly and concisely that I think that like the AD&D DMG gave you. You know, where there's like the AD&D DMG gives you so much stuff for running the kind of game that I like to run, which is, you know, very low prep, zero prep, where you're kind of reacting to the players and you have the tools to sort of react to them via the rules. I really like that. And I think talking to Vic, him and I don't see 5e as like our favorite edition, but we see it as like a serviceable, it could be a serviceable and good game. And
yes. Well, and not to neglect the influence of people like Kelsey with Shadow Dark. Like, how many people did she bring from the 5e world into the indie space? You know,
sure,
if we could do that for more people, I'm all for it.
And I think that like something like the rule you were talking about, the rule cyclopedia, I think presenting a 5e book that's like that, where it's like everything in one book, and it's like everything
excellent.
That it's everything you need in one book. So I have some work done on that. I've kind of put it on hold. I got to a point, and the reason why I was originally going to be a solo project with me, but I realized Vic really knows his 5e really well. Like he made a whole modern supplement book for 5e, and it's really good.
Okay.
And so he understands how 5e works. He's ran a lot of 5e. He still runs a lot of 5e. And so for me, he's sort of like, I need you with me. Like, you're going to bring in that 5e sort of expertise. I'm going to bring in that old school sort of like, how can we mold this to make, how can we like rough up the edges a little bit purposefully, you know, to make it a little more, because I think that's the charm of old schools. It's a little rough around the edges in the right way.
Yes.
And, you know, I think that's kind of our goal. So
yeah,
those are some of the things that I'll be working on.
That's fantastic. So the plan being to take the cow punchers and distill it into a core universal system, and do that as its own publication. What are some of the historical settings you're looking forward to once you get that done?
I'm really interested in a couple like medieval settings that I'd like to explore. In particular, I'm interested in like Byzantium. I think Byzantium is super cool. And it's not just because for me personally, I'm Eastern Orthodox. I just think it's like it's a really cool point in Roman history and in
absolutely
imperial history of that era. Lots of cool stuff. Like I'm doing actually some research and I'm reading a lot of John Julius Norwich's history on Byzantium. So someone was kind enough, I have no idea who, they sent me some books from John Julius Norwich on his Byzantium, the early years, and then the second book in that trilogy of books. So I've been like gobbling those up and reading those. I also think it'd be fun to do the Reconquista. So the Reconquista of Spain, I think, would be something I'd like to explore at some point in the future.
Now, of course, I know what you're talking about, but for people who don't know what you're talking about, why don't you explain the Reconquista for just a minute?
So there was a point where almost all of Spain, except for like the Basque North, was pretty much taken over by the Caliphate, by Muslims. And just from that little northern part in the Basque area there, the Spaniards and the people of Europe just it took centuries, but they reconquered all of Spain and booted them back down into Africa. And so to me, it's like that's just like the perfect. There's so many options there for like a really cool game in that kind of setting, you know.
Yeah. I mean, even the various phases of that, like you said, it takes place over centuries. So it'd be like, a campaign where it's at the very start and you got to make those initial gains against an entrenched enemy.
Yeah.
Would be a very different story than near the end where you're kicking the final remnants off and maybe the decision is now, well, do we keep going and attack them? Yeah. Do we go and take their land, or do we say we've retaken our land and that's enough? Like you said, there's immediate possibilities start just sprouting in my mind thinking about it.
And there's so much cool like characters, like El Cid and there's so many different to me, I think this is why I love history, is because history is so full of like cool and interesting characters and events that are way more interesting than sometimes occur in fantasy novels and things like that.
Yeah.
Like in my study of Byzantine history, there's so many like weird, cool, interesting events that occurred that you're like, this is better than like to me, this is better than anything George R. R. Martin wrote in Game of Thrones. Like there's
yeah. And that's definitely one of those things. Like I started in a similar way, reading history to get better at world building. Because I'm like, well, what exactly is a feudal culture like? Or something to that effect. And it very much informs the experience. And again, truth is stranger than fiction. The craziest stories that any author has made up, there's wilder stuff in real life, the kind of stuff that, like, if somebody wrote that in a book, you'd say that's unrealistic. That wouldn't, I don't believe that
but
all.
No, it happened.
And it really happened. There's historical accounts for it. And in a similar way, I think the same way about the monster manual is, you flip through the monster manual and you go, what is this weird thing, like a Zorn or a Boulette or whatever? These are weird creatures. This stuff couldn't exist. But then in real life, way weirder stuff than that exists in vertebrates and deep sea creatures and who knows what not.
For sure. So and Vic has ideas too that he wants to implement. Like we also were talking about just to show the variety of things we want to do with it. We have a game that we want to make called Redacted that would use this universal system that we're going to make. And that would be like set in the 90s. So like in the early 90s, and it'd be influenced. Yeah, pre-internet, but you're investigating like paranormal stuff. So it'd be like X-Files or Twin Peaks or something like that. Because I love Twin Peaks. I like the X-Files. I think it's a fun show.
Me too, both.
And so we both were sort of like, should it be like modern? And we were both like, no, it needs to be like pre-internet, pre-cell phone cameras and stuff like that. So we want to do stuff like that. And Vic has his own post-apocalyptic game that he made originally using the Cowpunchers rules called Waste Runners. So he wants to take whatever we do with this universal system and do another version of it, which would be like a post-apocalyptic game set in Europe. So, I mean, this is like all a lot of work. So don't anyone out there hearing this and getting excited, like this is going to take time, and there's only, in this case, there's two of us working on this stuff, but,
that's a strange way to invite everybody to pester you about these things, Tom.
Yeah.
That's a lot of words.
Yeah.
But okay. So no, I understand what it is. The number of ideas does not correlate to the amount of time you have to execute the ideas.
Yeah. So for the moment, it'll take time to make it work, but we do have goals and dreams and ideas of doing this and laying the groundwork for making a lot of this happen. And I'm happy to work with Vic too. He's a good guy, and he's been a good friend to me in this hobby. There's unfortunately, there's a lot of drama and there's a lot of there are a lot of characters in this hobby, and Vic has been a really good guy who's sort of like stood by me and been a good friend. So I'm really grateful to him, supporting each other, him and Greg and Crossface. A lot of people. There's a lot of people that are questionable in this hobby, but I think there's more good people that are sort of like super solid, and I'm glad they're my friends.
Yeah, it's by and large a very good crew in the indie RPG community on X. In particular. I've made a lot of new friends there myself, and it's for someone who was very averse to social media, it's been a surprisingly pleasant experience all around.
Yeah.
So much so that it inspired me to do this,
which is awesome. I mean, there's moments where I'm like, oh, why do I do this? But I think that's with anything you do.
Yeah.
But
and whereas as opposed to the normal day job where that's every second of every day.
Yeah.
Right? Like oh right, paycheck. That's why I got to do this.
But yeah, I want to really like build up the Wight Box setting and adventure modules and support for that. Oh, I should also say I want to increase the number of classes. So Wight Box only comes with the 3 core classes that were in 0E, which there's no thief in 0E. You only have cleric, fighting man, and magic user. I give you a thief and Wight Box in the appendices, but that's at the discretion of the referee if they want to allow that.
I personally appreciate that you left the thief out and made it optional because I hate thieves, but that's just me.
I could take them or leave them. I think thieves are cool, but I currently run my games without them, and I realize I don't really miss them either, though. So you kind of have all those other classes that can do all that other stuff. But there's a lot of strategic review articles that sort of implemented a lot of the really interesting classes that would later appear in AD and D. So things like the illusionist,
rangers.
Yeah, Paladin was in Greyhawk, so I am going to try and put that backwards compatible it from Greyhawk into the Wight Box system. But bards, monks, illusionists, druids, I want to incorporate all of that into like extra classes, extra spells for those classes that are spell casters and stuff like that, and sort of just expand that as well, because I know players like their options. I love the 3 simple classes, but I understand that players are like, well, I want to be a paladin. I can't just like role play the fighting man as the paladin. I want to have the paladin class. I get that.
Right. I want some powers. I want some things. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that in the least. Now being as somebody you started in 4th, moved on to 5th, played that for a while. What about the process? What about your experience took you in the direction of appreciating these early editions of the game? Particularly, like I really find that notion fascinating. Like, no, I want to focus on 1974. What's the gaming experience that somebody would have had picking up these rules in 74?
I think old school D&D has always interested me, and I think that this is maybe something a lot of guys that were there that played these editions maybe don't experience as like newer gamers coming into the hobby, or gamers that are coming into this, like, at least at the time in the mid 2000s, which was like a different era. It wasn't obviously like the 90s or the 80s at that point. There was a different context, a different milieu in everyone's mind about what the game should and could be.
Right.
And so you sort of look back at older editions and they're sort of esoteric and mysterious.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people explain them as such, even though they're not really. I think there's the aura that kind of people paint about them. And so
my personal theory on that one is that the people who were just touched enough to read and understand that stuff probably also did not have good communication skills.
I mean, it's probably likely. So to me, it was always like, I'm really interested in playing these older editions, but I don't even know where to start. There's all these different older editions that you could do. And so, you just sort of play what's available at the time, which was 4E, 5E. But then eventually with 5E, I sort of just got bored with it. And it was sort of like, well, screw it. Let's just try and figure this stuff out. So I started with clones. That was my entry into old school gaming, was like, I'll check out basic fantasy or a fantastic medieval adventure game, or, Osric and all the other ones. And then I sort of realized, like, well, these are actually sort of creative interpretations of what those rules are. I want to know what the rules actually were and then make that informed decision for myself. And so then I started diving into like running 1E games to the best of my ability, 0E games, BX, BECME games, Rule Cyclopedia games. I just started playing them, and I realized like they're actually not that as esoteric as I originally thought.
They're really not. It's just couched in challenging language, if nothing else.
And some, especially within 0E, there's some assumed knowledge. Like Gary and Dave are writing, assuming that you're a war gamer and you already know, what chainmail is and you know what chainmail is doing. And so when you read the 3 LBBs, you're sort of like, oh, I get it. I know what this is and what it's supposed to be. But there's a lot of us, and even at that time, because the game got big, a lot of people that picked up those booklets that didn't have that context.
Yeah.
And, and so hence like Holmes Basic and Greyhawk and all these other after booklets that were sort of trying to, oh, we got a lot of people that don't know what this is. We got to explain it,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that is my experience too, because for all my years in the hobby, I never even saw a copy of Chainmail until a couple of years ago when I bought a reprint, And then I read it once and I said, oh, that's why they stopped selling this. But then, it was around that time I stumbled across Alchemic Raker's, Old Lords Kickstarter. I'm like, that sounds like just the thing for me. I need somebody to dumb this down a little bit for me.
Yeah,
it's not that I can't understand it. It's that I don't want to. I'm just
it's a lot of work, in the way chainmail is written. Like for example, there's random rules that are like within like a monster description, or there's like in the weapon class rules, there's like the distances or like the distances for like catapults are like in a weird spot in chainmail where you wouldn't expect them, because it's sort of like they didn't, to be fair to them in the 70s too, it's not like anyone had ever really done this before them. So it's not like it's not like they had a template where it's like, we're going to section it off like this and we're going to do it like this. And this is the best way. This is the best pedagogy, for like explaining the game to people. They didn't have that. So I give them some breaks there for that. And that I give the misunderstandings of a lot of rules some breaks too, because of that. But it's a lot of work, because you got to go through and you got to go like, oh, there's like this random entry in the Potion of Heroism entry in the 3 LBBs in the loot section.
Right.
That sort of, oh, this explains like more about what it means about the hero fighting capability and why it is what it is, or
right.
So there's lots of like random stuff like that. And so I see how that stuff's just missed, you're just like, whatever, I'm not going to even deal with that, because it's too complex. It's too buried in all this random stuff that you can easily gloss over, but it's like critical information that you need. So yeah, like the Mad Tinker, that's a good comment there. Chainmail's written like it's the reader's 100th war game, not their first. Yeah.
I definitely felt that way. And not being much of a war gamer, I found Chainmail largely inscrutable. And a funny thing too, commentary, is that yes, it was the original target audience. That is a fair estimation, which is it's kind of ironic that it was targeted towards war gamers, but it grew into its own hobby that seems to have, as far as I see, vastly eclipsed wargaming as a hobby.
Well, and I think a lot of the wargamers looked at D&D. Like D&D, old school D&D calls itself a war game on the covers. Like there was no role-playing game term yet. And so it calls itself a war game on it. But from what I understand and of reading fanzines and things like that, a lot of the hardcore war gamers looked at D&D and were like, this isn't serious. This is like, they didn't really fully embrace it and adopt it. And so it really was the non-war gamers that embraced it and adopted it and then morphed it into what we kind of perceive it to be now as a conventional game. Even though I think what we perceive it now as a conventional game isn't what the rules are actually guiding you to do within that, which is super interesting to me. Some people will get offended by that view of mine, but it's just an acknowledgement, I think, of.
Why do you think that is?
Why people get upset?
Yeah.
I think because they take their game personal, and it kind of, especially like if you're a grognard and you were there, you don't want to hear you misread the rules 50 years ago. That hurts, and I get it.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel good.
It's an opportunity for personal growth. I'll sit here and admit that I did not read the first edition hardcover books carefully when I was in first reading them.
I didn't read 5e carefully, and so it led to, in my opinion, a very unjust judgment of the game that I've since softened on a little bit. I still think it has its flaws, but I appreciate it a bit more because I looked at it and I'm like, I was wrong about my initial impression of the game, because I didn't fully understand the rule book, you know.
And now that and that's another thing that's been my experience in many games over the years, is that there are intricacies of the system that are not apparent on the surface, but they arise through play. And particular rules, convergences, or whatnot, or weird things, and it's important to understand those things. I think that underscores why I agree with your philosophy that it's strict, raw rules as written. Do not modify anything until you've played it a whole bunch and you really understand what's going on.
Yeah, because then like I said earlier in the stream, there's a butterfly effect. And so like you understand, like, if I change this one thing, you understand the ripple effect it may have, or that it may not have. Maybe it's something that is worth changing and there isn't going to be that ripple effect, but you're not going to know that unless you test everything and tinker with it and play it and see what it actually feels like. Because I've had plenty of rules where I'm like, that's a stupid rule when you're reading it, that's dumb. Like, why is it like that? But then you're like, whatever. Okay, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I'm going to apply it at the table. And then you apply it at the table and you're like, oh, okay, I get it now.
That's why that works the way it does.
It's actually not that stupid, like,
right. Okay, this works better than I thought it was going to.
Yeah. And even still, it might not be ideal, but you're like, oh, you're at least like, okay, well, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but you don't ever get that unless you do what the game is telling you to do first, where it's guiding you to do. So I think that's I only think that your hacking and homebrewing and all that stuff will get better as you master a game. You'll only get better and better at it.
Do you give bonus XP for bell bottoms and crazy thick glasses when they play Wight Box?
No, I don't. But you're free to do that at your own table if you wish. It would be very on point. You also,
I don't know. That sounds an awful lot like Rule Zero to me.
You should probably play like in a basement that's like wood paneled with like olive green rug, shag rug on the floor.
And it has behind a wardrobe, so the players cannot actually see you; they only hear your disembodied voice.
And the room has to reek of like your parents' chain smoking. So,
brilliant! That's got to be it. Nothing but cigars here. And then there's an even bigger butterfly effect in a food fight.
How does he come up with these? It's just
man, he's good. He's good. And the thing is, he's equally good in person live. I don't know if you caught the show where he was my guest, but it was he reduced me to banging my head on the desk on several occasions.
Is he a dad? Does he have kids?
He's got 8 kids.
Oh, that explains it.
Yes.
There you go.
With each kid, the dad jokes double. It's a logarithmic scale. It's. I have wood paneling in my basement and tile from 1962.
Do you have the perfect environment for playing Wight Box in?
Yeah. And the weird thing about him is he does not look Chinese. He really doesn't.
I don't think I've ever asked him where he got his name from. I should ask him that.
Yeah, actually, I'm looking at that, and it's not Yang Lu Chen. I for some reason I think this is in. I want to say it's in the Yang family of Tai Chi, because he's not Yang the Invincible. That's Yang Lu Chen. But this name is so terribly Yang Zhenfeng or whatever. In any case, if you're into Tai Chi and Kung Fu and stuff like that, there's a whole lineage behind the Yang family. I've always secretly wondered, but I'll get to pick his brain on a separate occasion. I wanted to circle back to something that came up earlier in the conversation where you talked about how so many campaigns, whether they're old school or newer versions of D&D, they seem to peter out before they reach those domain levels. What do you think that is? How would you diagnose that problem?
I think that personally, I think that the game is originally designed for club play. I think this is a game designed for like how maybe you don't need 50 people like 0E is telling you to do. Maybe that's excessive. Although I think that with modern technology and having like Guilded and Discord servers, you could easily do that.
Yeah, I'm in a
easier than ever
Discord game that's insane, the scope and number of players in it that Serious DM is running, and it's wow.
Yeah, so I mean, like your experience in there, it's totally, you totally could. But I think even like having large groups of players, like really important. What I think is really important is timekeeping, and in particular, I know people have a problem with it, but I like the one-to-one time.
That is,
I think it works.
Such a more hot button topic than I would have expected it to be. I remember reading one-to-one time as a little kid in the 80s and going, that's too much paperwork and that's no fun. We're not doing that. Right. So, and we didn't really have like a regular group. It was more like get together with our friends whenever possible to play. So it wasn't like we had an ongoing campaign anyway. So one-to-one time just never factored into it for us. But my years of running a vampire LARP, one-to-one time is key to making that work.
Well, and I think because the game is always on, and I think like within D&D, for example, let's say like I'm running you through a game, and like in 0E, for example, it takes a week to delve in the dungeon. It just automatically eats up a week of time. It doesn't matter how long you're actually in there. I think it's just I think that's a way of keeping players from going into the entrance, kind of scumming around a little bit and getting out and running back to town and just constantly doing that.
Right.
So Gary was just sort of like, it eats up a week, which eats up your rations. It eats up,
it costs you money. Right.
Yeah. So he's going to make you pay for going into the dungeon. And so if you're going into the dungeon, you're paying the entry fee. It's going to, you're going to make it worth your time. You're going to go see all the attractions in the dungeon, as many as you can before you get back out. So I think that, like, let's say we're playing that kind of game, and we're keeping strict time, and we have lots of different people in the campaign. And so you're in your group, and you're like, we're going to go 3 hexes over here. So let's say that it takes 3 days, or let's say it's a week out. So it's the dungeon is a week out. We're going to go into the dungeon. That's going to eat up a week of time because we got to set up camp, go in, explore. We go in, we explore, we do our thing, we come back. So that's another week to get back to town. So that's like 3 weeks that your players have been adventuring there so far. And so it's sort of like you get back into town, but let's say we play every week. You play every week in my game. You play every Thursday night or whatever like that. So in a week, it's sort of like we come back and it's like, you can't be that character again. He's still out adventuring. He's still stuck. He's still on his way to the dungeon at that point from what we did the week before. So you have to have a stable of characters. So maybe you're like, okay, well, I'll play my cleric character and we'll all be our characters that are in this other part of the world over here. I think that builds like way more interesting adventures and stories, because now you're like, okay, that character over there is doing his thing. They were successful. Now I'm playing this character over here and we're exploring this part of the world. That's really cool. And sometimes the things that happen in this part of the world might affect the things that happen to the characters in this part of the world.
Right. And then they interact, they overlap with one another sometimes.
Yeah. And so I think that builds more buy-in, and I think it keeps things fresh and interesting, because it's sort of like, oh, what's going on in all these parts of the world? Because I got these stable of characters that are kind of all over the game world, the wilderness map. What are they doing? And then I think if you layer on top of that, like we've discussed earlier, giving high-level NPCs to players. You make decisions for the king. You make decisions for the orc chieftain.
Right.
You make decisions. You're going to be a level 9 wizard, a magic user. You're in your tower doing experiments, and you have X amount of gold, and you're going to be like making scrolls and spells and performing magical experiments in your tower. Like, how is that going to affect it? I think that like all that downtime stuff too, really gets people interested and keeps the campaign alive. And it has the benefit of generating content for the players all over that campaign to take part in an adventure in. So it never dies. And so it's not like you get to level 5 or 7 and it's like, well, I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to challenge you guys anymore. I think that there's a lot more options to challenge those kinds of players and for them to do stuff when they're just given free reign and they're just like, let's go ham on this fantasy world. I always tell people, like, I don't know how to run these kinds of games. It's like, well, my players don't get it. It's like, well, just imagine like you're dumped into Middle Earth. Like, what would be the first thing you'd want to go do and see?
Right.
Like, you're dumped into Middle Earth. You have a sword and you have armor. You have all your gear, and it's like, what do you go do? What do you go? What do you go and check out? You know, what do you go?
I'm heading to the Shire first and foremost.
Yeah, get some food. You know,
you got to hit the Shire first, so you know where to go from there.
And so, like, yeah, you know, it's like, what do you do? I think that if you can get players into that mindset, like that campaign's not going to fizzle out, and you can get to domain play. And you know, I used to be against it, but I'm at the point too now where I don't have a problem with getting in domain play right at the start in a lot of respects. Like, if you have a world setting and you have a king, like I said over here, or you have a wizard in a high tower, I don't think there's any reason why, if you have a good stable of players, like on your Discord server or something like that, where you can go, hey, Tommy, you're going to be the wizard in the tower over here. You design his tower. You have X amount of gold. Build it out. And then what are you doing over there? You know?
Mm-hmm.
So-and-so, you're playing as the dragon. You're the red dragon that lives in the mountain up here. He has a bunch of kobolds that worship him as in a cult. Design your dragon lair. This is how much gold you have. This is your actual treasure that you have. You designed that for me. Give me, as the referee, you're like, give me that as well. And those players can still play as adventurers that kind of go out and do stuff.
Yes,
for sure. But like they make random decisions for those villains or for those characters that are acting in the world. I think if you do that, like, your campaign has the potential to never end, in my opinion.
Yes. Matter of fact, the folks that I've heard of that have long running campaigns of varying types is I can't remember the exact length of time. I know Dungeon Delver has a long running campaign. Jacob Laterno, if I'm remembering the name correctly, has a 12-year campaign that he's been running. And I know Lord Gosumba, he has a campaign that he's been running for 30 or 40 years or something ridiculous like that. Like, yeah, it's, and of course he does, you know, exactly the thing we talked about. It's this weird amalgam Mod Podge of first edition, second edition, and whatever else he liked, you know, so it's a real grab bag of stuff. So it's one of the key principles, though, that you're laying out for campaign longevity is definitely one-to-one time, which sort of naturally leads into troop style play and having a stable of characters.
Yeah, and I think, because what I'm trying to aim at in my games is I'm trying to do as little amount of work as possible, because reacting to the players is already enough work. Trying to organize the game is already enough work. Running the game during that session is already enough work. So if I can pass off the prep, so like I said, the dragon player over here who's going to control the red dragon that has the kobold cultist, bro, you design your lair over there. You design the rooms. You tell me what's in each room. You know, use the the rules in the book to like roll for the contents of a room. You make that. You own that. That's yours. And there's going to maybe be players that are going to be going in and trying to rob you. We'll have a fog of war, and we'll figure out how that's going to go down. You know, and part of me, we have the ability to run that kind of game better than ever, because let's say like you're in that game and you're going to go raid the red dragon player's lair. You hear about it and you're like, let's go and get his treasure, guys. There's a red dragon that lives over here. And let's say you guys make some noise, and so he becomes aware that you're in there. It'd be fun. Like, it's easier than ever for me to text him while you guys are playing and going like, hey, you hear a noise in the dungeon.
What are you doing? Yeah.
What are you doing? You know, like, if I'm able to get a real time response from him to see what he does, you know, that's cool.
Yeah.
You know?
That's instant input.
And we're able to do that now, where like Gary and Dave couldn't really do that when they were running their games if they were playing that way. You know, you couldn't.
There was an analog hack that we used to use back in the day, and it was stupid. We just passed notes. I openly encourage players to pass notes to me and back and forth. And whenever the first player would do it, it would start an avalanche of notes because, wait a minute, you know, what's in that? You're not allowed to know. What's he doing? he's not doing anything that you can tell. Let me go, oh, okay. Or jot them down, pass back to him with a little smirk and a nod and a wink. And next thing you know, I'm getting notes from everybody. What are they doing? What are they doing?
But see, like, I think if that's just assumed in the campaign that that's going to happen, and you know that maybe a potential another player in the campaign is running that dragon, they are that dragon that lives in that lair with the kobold cultists. You know, like you're not messing with like you're messing with another player at that point, which is super interesting to me. I think the PvP competitive aspect makes it super interesting, and it gets people invested. You know, it becomes a war game.
It truly does. It truly does. And that PvP element, again, to reference my past experience with Vampire LARPs, that's very much how it worked. The kind of intrigues, plots, backstabbing, and social dynamics that arose out of 30 players all interacting with one another is so much more intricate and better than what I could come up with if I was sitting at a table with like 3 or 4 people playing vampires. It's the LARP. It's one of the few games where the LARP is hands down the superior experience, even though it strains the credulity at times.
Yeah, you know, and I think that, like I said, we have the ability to do that easier than ever now, you know, because of way we can communicate electronically with each other instantaneously, you know. So you could be running your Roll20 game or your Foundry game, or just having it on Discord purely, and you know, it's all theater of the mind, doesn't matter. But having the game always on, which comes hand in hand with the one-to-one time, I think can leads to all these cascade effects of things that open up for you, that if you take advantage of them. And I don't think that they end up being much more work. Like, it's work for you end up passing off the dragon play NPC to a player to be that dragon who runs that lair. And like, that's not work for you. It's just sort of like, hey, give me the dungeon map, the player after you design it, give me the dungeon, a copy of it, so I have it. Mm-hmm. And you know, like, if players are going to come do that, like, I never set that up. I have it. Oh, they're going to the red dragon lair.
There it goes.
Here's what Tommy made, you know. So they're going to go through it, and this is what it is. And the dragon's now aware that they're in it. So
when that comes up, do you run it yourself, or do you let Tommy DM that session and run it since he created it?
You know, I think that if in that case, let's say Tommy is available and he wants to do that, I would say, hey, go ahead, you know. Or but I also kind of think should also be an implication of like those kinds of characters, like the dragon or the king or the hobgoblin chieftain or whatever, that the DM has to take control of those at some points too, you know.
Right.
Because there might be cases where it's like, I can't get a hold of you, you're not available, so on and so forth, where it's sort of like, you have to trust me to make decisions for your character in these grand, almost geopolitical aspects for you, you know.
Right.
When I can't, I'll try and inform you and get your input as much as I can, but there might be instances where, you know, I have to put the dragon into combat. They snuck all the way in.
Right. It's happening. I gotta run it. This is what's happening.
Yeah, you know.
I understand that. And another one of the things you touched on was that a lot of things will peter out before they get to that active domain play, which by the old editions is name level, the 9th level. And that matches my experience too. Very few players stick it out to that point. And the few times it has happened, the game still ends because they don't have much interest in running a domain. What do you think needs to happen to prepare people for that switch? Because once you are running a domain, it does become a very different game. It does switch from role-playing game where I'm my one character to I'm a faction leader now. I got people relying on me for a living and whatnot. What are the steps that lead to that?
Like I said, I think introducing that at the start and letting players make decisions for NPCs from the start.
Got it. So the local evil baron, you pick one person and they make decisions for the local evil baron, and then eventually once they get a PC to 9th level, they might be incentivized to displace that evil baron and take over that place. You know, that as one possibility.
and I think you give them a taste of like what's going on, what the potential is, because maybe like you're doing the whole dungeon crawl adventuring thing, and you get to name level, it's time to retire, settle down, start your barony, and you're like, I don't even know where to start. But
Yeah.
if they were like doing it from the beginning with all these NPCs, and now they get to do it with their character that they've seen grow from level 1 to level 9,
Yeah.
like, you know, they're going to be way more interested into that than they would otherwise, I think, because they have some experience making decisions for these NPCs, for these movers and shakers that you as the GM maybe made. But I'm also not opposed to having a player that I trust, because I only think you should give out these high level, like if you have the wizard in the wizard tower or the dragon, you need to give those to players that you trust, that you think are experienced, and that you think it can do that. Because then I think that also does teach the newer players that maybe aren't familiar with that. Oh, that's how you do that. That's what's going on. They kind of see it. They kind of learn through osmosis. And so then by the time they get there, or maybe they get to a point midway through the campaign where you can be like, hey, do you want to make decisions for the Baron over here? You know, the evil Baron. You can do that. He's over here on the other. And I also think it's a good idea to make it on opposite ends of where their characters are adventuring. So if they're adventuring over here, 50 miles, 100 miles over here, they're controlling the Baron, so that there's not this like potential.
You don't have that conflict of interest. It's not, I'm controlling the Baron, and I also have a character in the scene where we're meeting the Baron, you know?
Yeah, I think that's that will take like a really trustworthy player who's going to be like, you know, they're going to be a good role player. They know they're going to like play it straight, and they're not going to.
Yeah, they're not going to. I have known players of that caliber over the year, but it's certainly not a responsibility you can hand out to anybody.
Yeah,
particularly a new player.
And I also think having a lot of co-DMs if you're running a big game too. Like I said, if you're running a Discord server and you want to have like 20, 30, 40, 50 people in a campaign, having a handful of you that are GMs together running that same world, I think really helps share the load. And then you can kind of divvy up characters or play them yourself even, you know. That could be it, where it's like you're a co-DM, but like you're really just DMing this one region that's controlled by the king who's making all the decisions, you know?
Right.
I think there's a lot of ways you could implement it, that you get players and other people besides you as the main referee involved, and you start building that story and kind of organically having it happen.
Oh, well, the Mad Tinkerer says there's a whole subgenre of manga where an adventurer stops adventuring and becomes a minor lord. There's a real demand for this kind of thing. So domain play is being represented in the manga. Now, I recently indulged in a Crunchyroll subscription on Amazon, and oh my God, there's some real crap coming out in terms of anime, like real garbage. Like, you know, I can't even imagine the sheer number of them with these long, stupid titles. That time I got reincarnated as a slime, you know, and stupid shit like that. But so I'm looking forward to these manga that you're discussing eventually making their way into actual series so I can enjoy them. Now, the last few minutes, I got to touch on something that very near and dear to my heart.
Sure.
Solo gaming.
Sure. Okay.
How did you get started in that aspect of the hobby?
I think because I wanted to personally, it really started because I wanted to practice zero prep and I wanted to master my rules. And the way I'd always done that was like when I get a new rule set, I'll like make a character. How does character creation work? Yeah. And then I'd like, okay, then I'd make a party of characters and then run like a mock combat against some monsters that are available in the book. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, I know how this works. And then it sort of became like, well, I could like just solo game and test every part of the game via the solo game aspect. You know, why does it have to? And I know this is a thing. Like Gary talks about it in AD&D, as an option. And even in Strategic Review issue number 1, where that dungeon generator first appears, he talks about how it's good for on the fly or for solo gaming. He says so. I sort of started doing that, and I started having a lot of fun, and I started realizing too, like, well, this is a great way of, if you have to prep, this is a fun way to prep, because like, oh, I build a little hex map with the generative tools in AD&D or whatever, you know, And then I fill that hex map with like, there's a village here and there's a castle here, and that castle you roll to see what's in that castle, and you're like, oh, it's an evil high wizard, and he has like this henchmen that are in there, and you're sort of like, you start building this world out, and you're like, well, this is just I'm just letting the dice, I'm letting my adventure sort of make the world for me. This is great. Like, I'm solo gaming this, but I could easily use this world to run my players through as well, you know.
Yep. I've had that be a two-way road. Every solo game is prep in some way. Matter of fact, I think solo play is the best way to prep, because like you said, like you were just using the example of the Red Dragon, is, man, sit down and play a Red Dragon for a solo session. What's a day in the life of a Red Dragon like? What do you do? Where do you hunt? What's happening, right? Can a Red Dragon take on the keep of the Borderlands if he just attacked it one day? Those are the kind of things that I experiment in, and that actually gives me an idea of the dragon as a character. What are his strengths and weaknesses? Does he have particular kind of spells with clever uses? And I feel that that's the best way to do. Most of my solo games do end up providing NPCs for my games, and actually, there's NPCs that I've played in my group games that I like so much that I took and ran solo with them. I do actual solo sessions. And like you said, nothing fills out the story and the things happening away from the characters as much as doing that. It's one of the best ways, like you said, rules mastery and preparation. And if I'm not mistaken, I heard just a little bit in there, despite yourself, the fun of the game and the story started carrying away with you. Started taking
well, I'm people think because of my views on the rules and zero prep that like I'm anti-story. It's no, I'm just getting to the story in a different way, and I think solo gaming kind of demonstrates that. So you make like these rules, you make these roles that you're doing. Like I need to get back to my solo games. I kind of took a break because I was sick with my Wight Box solo games, but in the last one, I started making these roles, and I determined there's a village here, and then there's a hobgoblin king that's to the north of the village, and I sort of realized that via the roles that like he's kind of ruling with an iron fist. The hobgoblin sort of he's sort of messing with the village. They have their own town guard or whatever, but it's not strong enough to deal with a number of hobgoblins. So they just sort of let them walk in and abuse them, because it's like no one wants to die, no one wants to make that fight. There's not enough of us. Maybe we can defend from the bandit here and there, but every time this hobgoblin king comes to collect taxes, there's we can't take that. And then I rolled some more amongst his forces, and it's like, oh, there's a minotaur there. Like, that's weird. Why is there a minotaur with a bunch of hobgoblins? And so you start to try and make sense of these roles. And this is a good way of building your at the table sort of improvisational skills with these roles. It's like, why is there minotaurs here with hobgoblins? And then I started thinking like, well, use oracles. Like, is there maybe an evil wizard that's behind it all? Yes, there is. And so it's like, okay, where's he at? Oh, he's further to the south. And so you start developing these things where it's like, there's an evil wizard to the south who has a bunch of minotaurs that serve him. And they also control this wizard, and these minotaurs control this hobgoblin king. And this hobgoblin king is like haranguing and harassing the people of this village. And so you just through solo play there, you've built this like very complex
social dynamic. There's a whole scenario to be explored there with multiple avenues of attack and resolution, And I loved hearing you bring up the oracle mention. Now that particularly in the zero prep world, are you finding that oracles are just as useful in your group play?
Sometimes, yeah, because I might have an idea of what I think something should be, but there's some points where a player will ask a character, well, does this NPC know XYZ? And you're like, well, I didn't really think about that.
Yeah, me too. Gosh, that's a good question.
Yeah, like, I don't know if the NPC would know about that or not, and then you sort of think about it, and it's like, well, he's a pig farmer, so he's not going to probably be too privy to the ongoings of the court that you're asking. So no, it's going to be very unlikely. So I'll roll on the unlikely table to see if there's any chance that he knows it for you. But maybe you're talking to a merchant who's like going in and out of the castle. It's like, well, maybe he does know something into the thing you're asking, So Wight Box has the same kind of oracles where there's like very unlikely, likely, middling. So very unlikely, unlikely, middling, likely, very likely, and so you have like probability ranges. So you just kind of decide, like, you have to make a judgment call.
Right.
What's the likelihood of this being true or false? And so then you can choose that level and make a roll and determine what it is. And you get a yes or no. In Wight Box, I have a yes but, and a no but. And then I give you the tables of the buts of the, here's the twist to the no, or here's the twist twist to the yes. And that gives you further things to sort of build off of and, maybe get inspired by. And you don't have to use it, but it just gives you something a little extra to sort of.
Agreed. Like solo is in a solo game, I find the Oracle much more necessary because it's just the kind of questions you would ask the GM. But like you, I've been historically, traditionally a zero prep DM. I just kind of make it up on the fly when I'm at the table, and I've sort of have always been, when they ask questions like that, I'd go, I don't know, I'll grab a D6 on a 4 or better. The answer is yes. Very similar things, or whatever I think it might be. So, discovering oracles and an actual codified system for such things, I found really interesting. Are you? It sounds like the oracle you designed was based somewhat on the Mythic GM emulator.
Yeah, I like that one a lot because I feel like it's easy and intuitive, I think, for people to sort of look at it and go like, okay, I'm asking the pig farmer about courtly intrigue. What's the likelihood of the pig farmer knowing about courtly intrigue? He probably doesn't care,
Right.
So, you can kind of pick the varying levels of ability or likelihood based on that. And there's like a set probability standard there that you can use. I like the way that works. So.
Me too. And, I've been playing Calarath a lot recently by Castle Grief in my solo play. And he's got a nice, simple D6 Oracle, which is, it's the writing prompts, like you just said, the 6 spaces give you no, but, no, and, or just plain no, and the same variations on yes. And for such a simple Oracle, I find it really provides all the answers I need. Although at times, I do sincerely want that granularity of, it's super unlikely that this pig farmer is going to know anything about courtly intrigue, but
maybe he's heard something, and then maybe he heard a little bit of information, So yeah, I like those, and I just think it shows it's a good guide, because then eventually you could start mixing things up however you want, and like you said, like I just want to roll a D6 and 4 or better, yes or no, Sometimes I use reaction rolls too, as a
and that's sort of my default method when I'm solo playing. Is if the game I'm playing has a system for it, I use that. If not, then I can fall back on the Oracle.
Yeah.
But again, for my mileage, I found the Mythic GM emulator to be a little bit too much, a little bit too thick, particularly when you add in the chaos factors.
Yeah, I don't have any of that stuff, and I feel like that kind of stuff is a little unnecessary because I think that the chaos stuff can come from like random encounters, reaction rolls. Like you should be using those things too. You don't need to have these like buildups of.
I also found that the way it's designed, once you get into a negative loop, you get nothing but no's. Like once the chaos factor goes down, most of your answers are no. On you don't have a very good chance of getting a yes out of the Oracle.
Yeah.
So and whereas it was kind of the same. So and when I use the Mythic, which I still use it mostly because I have a phone app. So while I'm solo playing, I can just like, boop, give me a roll, give me an Oracle check there. But I found that I just lock it at Chaos level 5 and use it from there. I don't really go up and down because I've had occasions where you end up,
I'm never getting out of this.
Chaos factor is down to 2 and I can't get a yes on any question.
Yeah. Yeah. So to me, solo gaming is like, I know a lot of people don't like it. Some people have like make fun of us solo gamers, you know.
Oh yeah. I've always done it, but I lived in the closet until a few years ago when I started seeing solo channels on YouTube, and I was like, gee, it was like years, and I never thought to look up Dungeons and Dragons at all on YouTube. And then I was like, oh my God, there's people doing solo play channels, and
Yeah.
that's when I came out of the closet. Now I'm a loud and proud solo guy.
I think like it can really teach you a lot. I think part of it too is like a mental mindset thing. I think you have to kind of maybe have a little bit of a predisposition to a lot of these ideas to make them click. If you're so stuck in the mindset that like of the conventional game, we'll call it, of there's a single group of people, single group of players. The players are always going to be those characters, and the story is always going to revolve around those guys.
Right.
And they're the special chosen ones. And there's I gotta prep a 3-act story. Like if you're so stuck in that, which is fine. I'm not gonna say you're a bad person.
Right.
But,
yeah. I mean,
but if you are so married to that, you're not gonna. This is what we're talking about. Isn't gonna make any sense to you, and it's gonna just be rubbish, and you don't get it. So,
Yep. I can totally get that. All right, John, we are at the 2-hour mark here, man. Thank you so much for all this time. It was this great conversation. I appreciate being able to pick your brain like this.
No problem. I'm glad we could reschedule and get it going. So.
Awesome. That's great. Do you have any parting words for our wonderful and talented audience?
Yeah, check out Wight Box on Kickstarter. It's in the last 48 hours, last 2 days right now. It'll end on the 1st of October. So I think that's Wednesday.
Yep, dropping it in the chat again so everybody can get another click at that if they want to.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's multiple tiers. You can get just the PDF. You can get print-on-demand booklets. And then there's a box set, which comes with 3 booklets. I actually have them here. These are the print-on-demand ones. So
nice.
Here's what those will look like.
And those are going to be the contents of the box set when it comes out, along with the cardboard map you were discussing.
Yes, a set of dice, 20 pre-printed character sheets, and a little 3-panel. It's going to be small, but a little 3-panel referee screen. So, awesome. And then everything in a box, obviously. So
that's fantastic. I love box. So actually, I think box sets are cool. I don't get them myself because none of the box sets from my childhood survived. So, I prefer books. They sit on a shelf better.
Sure. I like box sets. I think they're kind of cool. And, I think with what I'm doing here, where there's like a board and all these things, like you kind of need something to put everything in. I really want to have that experience. I always loved with the outdoor survival board, and this isn't, I guess the final thing I'll say about it is like I love the idea that a bunch of people were campaigning on the same geography, but it was always a different experience at every table across that geography. And so I think that's super cool.
Agreed. That's incredible. Every single one has been different because the contents of those hexes are basically randomly determined. So you never know what's going to be waiting for you out there when you go.
Exactly. And so I think I want to recreate that slight feeling that I think is so cool, even though I don't know how many people actually think about that, but
man, Tinkerer backed Wight Box. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I don't even know what I'm at right now. I think I broke 45 finally. Yeah. We're on our way to 46. That's crazy.
Here we go. Oh, yeah. Man, within spitting distance of 46K. That is wonderful news, John, and I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I'll think the final thing I'll say is I'm thankful to everyone out there, you and everyone else that's been so kind to me and backed my work and been interested in what I do. It makes me want to work harder and always try and one up myself and what I do every single time, to just be better and better at this and not get complacent, because a lot of people like what I do and I respect their support. It means heck of a lot to me, it pays the bills. So.
Well, and on the opposite side of that equation, like I say, John, you do go to great lengths to build a real community around it between the Gilded and your activities, just the YouTube, the Substack, everything. So, man, proud to have you on here, and thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Jawin with Jack, every Monday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern, streaming on X, YouTube, and Rumble. Check out that ticker we got at the bottom of the screen and follow us on all the different locations. Thank you, everybody.